My mom went behind my back and added a huge traditional groom's cake to my wedding, even though I told her no multiple times. Now I'm regretting everything and wondering if I'm the one being a bridezilla over cake. Posted by you/lollyluhu. My fiancé and I are getting married this fall, and the cake has been a huge point of contention with my mom. Long story short, we wanted a dessert bar or cheesecake instead of a traditional cake. My mom initially insisted on having at least a small cake for just us to cut. We compromised and got quotes. Right before we were about to put a deposit down, she decided that having just a cake for us and not for guests was tacky, so we needed to get a sheet cake to serve as well. We were annoyed because she was the one to suggest it, so we cut our losses and opted to do tiered cheesecake and mini cheesecakes, as we originally wanted. My mom wouldn't let this go for the past 6 months. She then decided to focus on pushing for a groom's cake. My fiancé did not want one. When I told her this, she said, "It's really only a groom's cake in name, and not about what he wants." I told her a firm no, multiple times because she wouldn't give up. That brings us to this week. I got a text yesterday saying she was at the bakery and had paid for the order. I got suspicious because I never included her in those communications. I called the bakery today and was told by a very apologetic employee that my mom had added a multi-tiered groom's cake, with different fillings, flowers, the whole kit and caboodle. We still have cheesecake, but I feel like it'll look silly next to what is essentially a wedding cake. My question now is, what do I do? She doesn't know that I know. I'm furious and hurt. Obviously, it's just a cake, but it's not really about that now. She went behind my back and crossed multiple boundaries after I told her no. Am I being a bridezilla for not letting her have her traditional wedding cake? Relevant comments. Commenter 1. Why should she have a cake at your wedding? If you don't want cake, just change the order back and call it a day. And add a password for all your vendors moving forward so changes can't be made without it. Up. Everyone I've spoken to has either been in the camp of, well, they're paying for the wedding or not her wedding, not her cake. I think that's why I'm torn because yes, they are paying. But changing the order behind my back? I'm more upset about the violation of trust than the actual cake, I think. Commenter 2. It is not just a cake, it is a breach of your boundaries and your wishes. Cancel her order. Put a password on all your wedding accounts. You are not marrying her, you are marrying your partner. Up. Exactly. It's the breach of trust that's been the most upsetting. I need to call back tomorrow and see if it's possible to cancel and get a refund, since she paid in full. I suspect she did that intentionally, thinking she was being so clever. Commenter 3. Ask the bakery to convert the cake into additional cheesecake and mini cheesecakes. Maybe a smaller groom's cake that looks nothing like a wedding cake. Do not tell her you did this. When you go to the bakery, have a password put on the order so it cannot be changed after you make the appropriate changes. She thinks she got something over on you. If she checks on it, the password will stop her from making any other changes. If she shows up at the venue with yet another cake, instruct the people at the venue to put it in the back and not bring it out. Up. Thanks for the advice. Having the cake changed to more cheesecakes is a good idea. Never in a million years did I think I'd have to become like one of the Redditors and password protect my wedding, but here we are. Update 1, 3 months later. Hello again. A big thank you to everyone who gave advice on my original post. I'm now married and had the best, most relaxing honeymoon with my new husband, free from any pesky family drama. By the time I posted, it was too late to cancel the wedding due to deposits and contracts, so we proceeded as planned. To clarify, yes, my parents did pay for the wedding, although my husband and I made it clear several times that we didn't expect or need them to pay for everything. No, I don't think their financial contribution excuses my mom's actions. My parents reiterated that it was our wedding and we should do what we wanted, but clearly, the cake was the exception, even though my mom had previously agreed to cheesecake if that's what we wanted. My husband and I got a laugh out of everyone's suggestions for how to handle the cake. Initially, I wanted to go the petty route and surprise my mom by calling the bakery to change the cake design to something she would find tacky, reflecting my husband's hobbies, like a groom's cake should. After taking a few days to weigh my options, I knew that my desire for petty satisfaction would ruin my relationship with my mom, and that was something I didn't want to do. I knew she was clearly in the wrong and acting like a child, but I wanted to handle the situation like an adult, if only to maintain the moral high ground. I communicated with my parents and listed all the reasons why this situation, and other issues throughout the wedding planning, was hurtful and completely out of line. Shock of the century, I'm sure, but it didn't go well. There was a series of texts from my mom that demonstrated she couldn't take accountability or understand that I wasn't mad because she ruined my wedding by ordering a cake, but rather that she went behind my back, knowing it would upset me. I tried multiple times to redirect the conversation to the actual issue with little success. We ended the conversation with her apologizing for the cake ruining the wedding, but it wasn't a genuine apology, and she missed the bigger issue. She also agreed to move the groom's cake to the day before the wedding, which I was fine with. At this point, we were a week out from the wedding, and I was too stressed to continue pressing the issue. I dropped it and refocused on enjoying my wedding as much as I could. I interacted with my mom as little as possible on the day of, and our wedding party and coordinator did a fantastic job acting as a buffer. Since the wedding, I've had some contact with her, but it's been much less frequent so I can get some much-needed space. We'll need to have some tough conversations, but for now, I'm choosing to spend my time with my new husband, and getting back into therapy. Weddings, man. They really bring out the crazy in people. Oh, and the cheesecakes were a huge hit, by the way. Relevant comment. Commenter. I'm glad you had the day you wanted and enjoyed your honeymoon. Unfortunately, even though this wasn't the dynamic you had with your mom before, the fact that she refused to see her error and wasn't genuinely apologetic. If I were you, I would bear that in mind for the future, i.e., other major events, children, etc., and plan accordingly. Oh, absolutely. The lack of respecting boundaries and breaking trust for future life events was actually something I pointed out in our conversation. She didn't seem to understand the point I was making, just kept going back to the cake and not the deeper issue. Update 2, 1 year later. Hey, I'm back with a 1-year update on what happened when my mom changed my wedding cake order without me knowing. People have reached out for an update, and coincidentally, several friends of mine who've gotten engaged recently have shared similar family dynamics. I've shared this story with them, but I feel the need to blast it out online too. Now that I'm a year out, I can acknowledge that I love my husband and our life together, but having a traditional wedding was a big mistake. When I think back on our wedding day, I am devastated to admit that the few emotions I remember weren't about how much I love my now husband or the excitement over our future together. Instead, it's mostly anxiety over my mom and wondering whether things were about to blow up. If you're recently engaged and have difficult family relationships, or if you're not completely sold on spending a ton of money on a wedding, please let this be yet another loud voice yelling at you: elope. Have a courthouse wedding. Don't invite problematic guests. Do whatever you want, but for the love of God, avoid that family drama at all costs. I wish I would have stuck to what I originally wanted, eloping somewhere abroad, but alas, I made my decision and now have to accept it. What I didn't mention in my initial post was that my relationship with my mom immediately and irrevocably changed as soon as I became engaged. Even though I knew she could be a lot, I had no idea what I was in for. If I could do it all again, I would have stopped that wedding planning train in its tracks after the first few signs of craziness. The cake was, unsurprisingly, just the last straw of many incidents. Greatest hits include telling literally, and I mean literally, everyone she knew that we were getting engaged, less than 10 minutes after my husband told my parents he planned to propose. Upon sharing the proposal photos with her, commenting on how big I looked in the photos, which are, to this day, ruined for me. Telling a family member who commented on how beautiful I looked at a pre-wedding event, yeah, well, she's gained a lot of weight. Trying to crash my first look the day of my wedding and acting hurt that she wasn't invited. Actually crashing my first look and throwing a fit when my wedding coordinator wouldn't let her in. Making the wedding all about how she never had a say in anything and that I was the controlling, immature one. We do still have contact today, but it's limited, and I am very guarded with what I choose to share. She never genuinely apologized or acknowledged the stress and hurt she caused. Short of some major changes on her part, I don't see that happening. So yeah, moral of the story, absolutely soak up the fresh excitement of getting engaged. But seriously, ask yourself if there's anyone in your life who will make wedding planning hell on earth. If you're oh so fortunate to have a character like that, have a plan to handle it, and be prepared to enforce those boundaries. And for the extra crazy families out there, maybe just elope. Additional information from up. The point of this update was more so to serve as a cautionary tale to any engaged couples out there who are dealing with a situation like this. Learn from my mistakes. What starts as little complaints or drama can quickly snowball and permanently change relationships if you don't nip it in the bud. Up on how to handle family issues during wedding planning. Fair enough. I've seen so many couples recently having issues with family very early on in wedding planning, so I wanted to share how, 1 year later, my family relationships are horrible because of one day. Honestly, it wasn't worth it for me. Yes, I regret not handling it earlier and picking up on those red flags. Hindsight is 20/20, and life can be more complicated than what's on paper.